Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you are all keeping well and finding ways to navigate these challenging times. We're truly pleased to have you with us, and I'm confident that today's session will be very helpful. It's a real pleasure to introduce our speaker, my wonderful colleague, Dr. Charlotte. Dr. Charlotte is a consultant clinical psychologist with extensive experience working across all age groups, from children and adolescents to adults. She specializes in perinatal mental health and has also worked with the specialist trauma and attachment service in the UK, bringing a wealth of expertise and compassion to her practice. I'm sure you'll find her insights valuable. Thank you again for being here. Charlotte, over to you.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that warm introduction. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Yeah, in some challenging circumstances and times. Yeah, we're really pleased to have you here with us. Just to start with a little bit of kind of housekeeping. So because it's a webinar format, your microphones and cameras will be switched off throughout the webinar. There will be a question and answer section towards the end. So please do submit your questions sort of via the chat. And then Barbara will help me kind of with going through those questions and we'll do our absolute best to answer as many of them as possible towards the end. The content of this webinar may feel distressing, so please just do kind of whatever you need to do to look after yourselves during this webinar. If you need to kind of step out and then rejoin, that's absolutely fine. To kind of link with the final point, this session will be recorded and you will be able to access it after the webinar has finished. So if kind of staying present feels emotionally difficult or challenging because you've got kids at home or other things going on, that's absolutely fine. Um, just also to acknowledge, of course, there is a chance that we may receive one of the emergency alerts during the webinar. If that happens, I'm currently in a safe space, so I feel able to stay where I am and continue with the webinar. But of course, everyone, you need to do whatever you need to do to look after yourselves and be safe. And as I say, it will be recorded, so you'll be able to access it afterwards if you do need to leave. So thinking about what we're going to cover today, I guess we're going to start by sort of acknowledging the current context, thinking about the impact of the events of these last few days on ourselves and on the children that we care for. I'm going to tend to use the language sort of children that we care for because I think there's a range of people in the audience. I think there's some parents that are here probably with thinking about their own children, and then we also have I think some educators, some school staff that may be thinking about the children that they care for in their professional roles. But of course, many of you will also be parents, so there'll be kind of crossovers there. I hope to share some guidance on how to talk to children about what's happening and information about how to support them. But also of vital importance is to think about how to look after yourselves whilst looking after the children that are in your care. So thinking about what's happening at the moment, the events of the last few days have been difficult for all of us. And I think in talking to people about what's happening, one of the most challenging parts of what's happening at the moment is the ongoing uncertainty. Most of us are experiencing a really wide range of emotions. I'm talking to lots of people that feel really angry, feel really sad, confused, worried, and there's understandably a lot of fear. All of these emotional responses are completely normal and understandable. There are certain factors that we know are affecting how children are experiencing and responding to these events, both kind of here and now whilst it's happening, but also in terms of their longer term response. So these include sort of the age and the developmental stage of the child, and therefore, I guess, how much they're aware of what's happening and the understanding and the meaning that they might be making of what's happening. Their temperament. So I guess we know some of our children are more highly sensitive. They're more affected by emotional events and experiences. We also need to think about life experience and the child's history. But of course, this is highly relevant for us as adults as well. We know that people that have experienced trauma in their past, even if on the surface the trauma seems completely different, Often there will be overlaps. Often there will be links between how that individual has experienced the trauma, what the trauma meant to them, and therefore it's very possible that what is happening right now is reactivating previous traumatic experiences for our children, and as I said, very much for us as adults as well. We also know that current or previous mental health difficulties can also affect how people are experiencing what's happening right now. And I think that's particularly the case for people with anxiety. So I guess one of my key messages today is that actually our job is not to get rid of these feelings, but rather it's to help our children and the children that we care for to be able to understand and manage these feelings. And I guess what's particularly challenging about that right now is that we're living through this event or these events with the children in our care in real time. It's not something that's just happening to the children that we care for, that we have to support them with. We're in it with them too. We're experiencing it too. We have all of the emotions, we have all of the uncertainty, and that can make it so much harder. Now, of course, safety is the number one priority for everybody. I'm sure everyone will agree that the UAE has done a really great job of keeping us all safe and is of course really committed to continue to do so. And just a quick note on kind of how we can continue to stay as safe as possible. It's following official guidance. I've got a little list there of some kind of prompts and resources and staying informed through reliable sources. So making sure that we avoid unverified information, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and when we're not receiving accurate information, it can unnecessarily, unfairly kind of increase fear. I'm wondering what you're all noticing, what you're all observing kind of in your children or the children that you care for kind of right now. Um, I know what I'm seeing at home. I have two little ones at home, and what I'm seeing kind of at work and through conversations is that the routine is disrupted. And of course, the routine is disrupted in many ways because schools are closed, nurseries are closed, etc. But that throws us all off, right? So we're seeing lots of changes to eating, sleeping, we're seeing more screen time, we're seeing a lot of bigger feelings, bigger reactions. So you might notice that actually your child or the children that you care for are responding differently. They're responding in ways that they don't usually, or their response seems bigger to something that you think previously they wouldn't have had a difficulty with. We're seeing lots of confusion. And what I would say is that actually, I think a lot of this confusion isn't verbalized. Even our older children don't necessarily have the language to be able to express this confusion. And the same goes for kind of the other points, kind of they don't necessarily have the language to express the fear or the questions that they have in their minds. And I absolutely know that a lot of us are seeing more kind of behavior that challenges. So as we go on, I'll think with you about how we respond to this. So let's think about our response. Let's think about how we respond to their emotions. So as trusted adults in their lives, they're looking to us. They're watching us so closely to understand what's happening and to know how to respond. And that's what is so challenging, I think, about looking after children right now, is we know that we're kind of being watched so closely. They're seeing how we're responding and using that as a gauge for how they should respond, how worried or not they should be. So another really key message for today is they do not need us to respond perfectly. None of us can do that. That's just not possible. They also don't need us to have all the answers. Again, that's not possible. There is nobody in the world right now that can tell us with absolute certainty how everything is going to play out and on what time scale. And that is really hard to manage. They do need us to try to provide age appropriate information, manage their questions, and help provide a sense of containment. And as we go on, I'll talk about how we achieve that. They also need to know, and probably more regularly than we might initially assume, that right now they are safe and we are safe and that we're in this together. that we as trusted adults in their lives are here to support them and keep them safe. As we go through the webinar today, I'm going to try and give some quite practical examples of what this might look like in practice. Because when I'm working with families kind of outside of the current events, what often happens is I might give a suggestion, and then I often get kind of the question of like, well, what does that look like? How do I do that? What do I say? And I understand that that's challenging for most of us to think of at the best of times. And right now, we're probably not going to be thinking in our most kind of clear, from our most clear kind of frame of mind. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through every single one of these. And of course, not every single one of these will feel relevant to you and your circumstances. So I might just go through a couple. And then if you want to come back to these at another time, please access the recording, come back, look at these examples, think about how they could work kind of for you and your particular circumstances. But we might want to say things like, kind of, thank you so much for telling me that you feel sad. It's completely understandable to feel sad right now. I feel really sad too. And then we might ask them something like, what do you think would help with those feelings of sadness right now? What do you need? Would it be nice to come and have a hug? That sort of thing. I think one that is really helpful and links with the last point that I was just making around safety is kind of to just really reiterate that yes, things can feel scary right now, but right now, here we are safe, and that whoever you are is here with them, working with them to keep them safe. And wider than that, expanding outside of the family, expanding outside of the school, helping them know that the people in charge of the UAE are working really hard to make sure that we're safe. That's really going to help them feel kind of contained and manage kind of some of the worry and fear. Thinking about some of the challenging behaviour that we might be seeing at the moment. We might be finding that they're not listening so well, not following instructions as they usually would. We might notice kind of more rude language or even physical aggression. And underneath all of these behaviours are a wide range of emotions. Their behaviour is a window into their emotional experiences. And as I said a moment ago, children, especially young children, aren't necessarily going to have the language to express how they're feeling and express how these events are affecting them. So often what we see are big feelings that might feel disorganized, might feel disproportionate, might feel random and like you can't understand them. And then we also see maybe behaviors that challenge, maybe behaviors that they don't typically do or they haven't done since they were really small. Our children are not doing this intentionally and deliberately. Our children are doing this because it is the only way that they know how to manage the thoughts, feelings that they have in their brains and bodies at the moment. So at certain points, for certain behaviours, we might choose to be a little bit more lenient than usual. So for example, I guess I think there are a lot of families in the UAE right now that are being more lenient when it comes to screen time and thinking, you know what, yes, let's have a few more movies than usual. Let's have an extra episode than usual. But actually, at times like this, boundaries are more important than ever. So our children do need boundaries. And actually, whilst they will often push against them, knowing that the boundaries still exist, knowing where the boundaries and the limits of those boundaries lie, will help provide a sense of containment and safety. And this sort of links with the point that I'll make a little bit more later on, but actually we want to try and maintain as much normalcy, as much routine, as much consistency as is possible in the circumstances. We can validate the emotions that are sitting underneath and driving the behavior without accepting or condoning the behavior. So let's just think about what that might look like in practice. So it might be saying something like, I understand you're feeling angry or whatever the feeling is right now. It's okay to feel that way, but it's not okay to hit your brother. Something like, it looks like you're having some really big feelings right now. That's okay. I'm here to help you with your feelings. I can't do that when you're shouting at me. Let's come together. Let's sit, use our calm, quiet voices and work out what's happening. Work out what you need right now. We're going to move across now to thinking about how we talk to our children about what is happening. I'm going to divide this into age ranges, but some of the key principles are making sure that our information is clear and it's accurate. We want to make sure that the language that we use and the information that we share is age appropriate, but we want it to be as close to the truth as absolutely possible. We want to be concise. Children don't need, especially young children, really long, kind of winded explanations. They need short amounts or pieces of kind of information, and we need to be checking in with them to see how they're processing this, what sense they're making, what sense they're making of this, and how they're responding. As I was saying a moment ago, we want to try and avoid lying. We also really want to try and avoid minimizing or dismissing what they're hearing and what they're seeing. So, for example, we want to try and avoid saying things like, "Oh, no, it's fine, nothing's happening outside," or giving a response that's actually not true, like, "No, no, it's just fireworks," or kind of saying, "No, no, everything's fine." Um, I guess reassuring them of safety is different to kind of saying everything's fine and pretending that nothing's happening. We want to make them aware that we're here to help them understand what's happening, to help them manage what's happening, and that they can ask any questions that they have. But we also need to be clear with them that we might not have the answers. Sometimes we have to sit with that not knowing, and that can feel really, really hard. But that you're in it together and they can still ask, and you would do your absolute best to answer all the questions that you can. I think it's also really important to not ignore what's happening. Children are much more perceptive than we realize. So children, often much younger than we may predict, have some degree of awareness and understanding of what is going on. The way I've kind of divided it in terms of sort of ages is also thinking about kind of the young children that maybe don't have social media or a phone, and then slightly older children that do have access to those things. So even really, really young children will notice that things are not typical right now. Now, I know over the last couple of days, things have, in many ways, returned to a higher degree of normalcy. But actually, if we think about what is the anchor of a lot of children's life, it's school and nursery for our younger ones, and that is still closed and is going to be closed for the rest of the week. So they know that things are different than usual. They're going to notice this, they're going to feel this. So it's really important to kind of acknowledge this and name this. Our children will probably know that this was not a planned holiday, because often when we have a planned holiday, we will have been talking to them about it in the lead up, maybe talking to them about, this is your last day at school, or you've got 2 more days left of school and we're going to do this during the holiday. So name the things that you think they're struggling with or missing, and just reassure them that, they will be able to get back to doing these things as soon as we can. And again, here are kind of some examples of things that we can say to just help kind of, I guess, name what you think might be going on for them, and kind of reassure them around that. I'll pick out a couple of examples, kind of, I guess, that relate to the sounds that we're hearing, because I think that's a question that we're getting asked a lot at the moment. So I think it's really important, as I say, to be accurate, but obviously in a way that feels age appropriate and doesn't feel too scary for them. So, for example, for younger children, I think it can be helpful to say something like, the noises that you're hearing are the people whose job it is to keep us safe. If they're slightly older and you think they have a sense of what the military kind of means, you can absolutely say that, sort of in the sky, and they're making sure that we're safe. So sometimes there'll be loud noises, but we're safe here together. And actually, what we know is that whilst those loud noises, whether it's outside or whether it's the alerts on our phone, might startle our children, actually, it's our response to those noises that unsettles them more than the noise itself. So that's another challenge for us. And as I say, I'll think about that in the end with you about how we manage that, of sort of how we manage our response to kind of contain our children's response. So for our older children, children with social media and a phone, we want to try and approach things in a very calm and curious way. We might want to think carefully about kind of where we are and when we have the conversation. So often children will find it much easier to talk to us when they're engaged in an activity with us or alongside us. I guess a classic one that we often see for sort of teenagers is maybe in the car when we're driving together because we're side by side, or when we're having a walk, kind of that's an easier time to talk because there's not that direct kind of eye contact. So it can just feel easier to have those conversations. Before you go diving in with sharing lots of information, as I say, be curious, ask what they already know. You don't need to give loads of information. So ask what they already know and start where they are and build upon that. I guess we also have to acknowledge that for older children, they probably are going to be exposed to information that we can't always monitor. So it's really important, more important than ever right now, to have conversations about social media, about the internet, and thinking about kind of misinformation, how we know when information is reliable and accurate or not, and really open that door. Make sure that they know that they can come to you. If they're seeing something that's upsetting them, if they're seeing something they're not sure about, bring it to you, ask questions about it so that together you can kind of unpick it and try and think about the accuracy and reliability of that information together. For our older children as well, they will have lived through the pandemic and they will have had an experience of online learning. And for a lot of our children, that was not always the best experience. And that's not a criticism of any of our educators here by any means. I'm sure you're all fully aware that despite your absolute best efforts, some children just found online learning really challenging. I think it's important then maybe to think about what their last experience of online learning was like. What was difficult about that? Is there anything practically that can be done to make it feel different this time? A lot of people are, finding links between the pandemic and what's happening right now, even though, as I say, on the surface, they might seem like completely different events. There are some similarities, so it might be helpful to kind of think with the children in your care about what's feeling similar and what's feeling different about that time. So here are just some questions that maybe you could you could go through with older children to sort of find out a little bit more about what they already know. Now I'll move on to kind of thinking quite practically about how we help the children that we care for sort of manage their distress. So, as I said a couple of times already, often our children, even the older children, might not be able to put into words the thoughts they're having, the feelings they're having, and how they're really experiencing these current events. Often children find it easier to express themselves through creative means. So right now, I'd really be encouraging as many opportunities as possible for any kind of creative method that you think that the children that you care for would get on board with. So it can be drawing, colouring, painting, junk modelling, dancing, kind of creating plays or shows. Anything that you think will give an opportunity for them to kind of express themselves. You might see kind of some of this stuff coming out in their play as well. It's okay to use distraction. So it's okay to kind of think about constructive activities that you can do, they can do, you can do together, kind of to occupy their mind. One of the things that kind of the research really shows us is really helpful and important during kind of times like this is connection. So we want to try and make sure that they are feeling as connected to their kind of trusted adults as possible. and beyond that as well, and connected to the people that are most important to them. So that might be friends, that might be family back in home countries or in other parts of the UAE. And much like we all had to do in the pandemic, it's thinking kind of quite creatively about how we manage this. And I guess kind of linked with that, it's about promoting peer support. I guess particularly for our older children, sort of really thinking about this as an opportunity for a sense of kind of community and coming together and supporting each other in kind of what we're going through and the challenges that they'll mutually kind of be experiencing. As I was saying earlier, we really want to try and maintain routine as much as possible. And I guess part of that is thinking about meaningful activities. So activities that are of importance to them, thinking about sort of hobbies, interests, and I guess making kind of an assessment, making a call of which of those feel possible and safe to do right now if they're external, and how much of those can be done kind of in spaces and places that feel safe to be in and to do so. Another suggestion is kind of maybe creating a particular kind of calm space, either within their bedroom or within the house, with maybe suggestions of things to do to help them keep calm, which we'll kind of link to in a minute. Might be breathing techniques, relaxation exercises, some of their favorite books, some of their kind of favorite cuddly toys. So just a place that they can go to if things are feeling a bit much. Maybe they can't even put their feelings into words, but it's just a place that they can go of their own accord, or maybe you can kind of direct them to, that's just going to help them kind of regulate and reset. As I was saying earlier, kind of, I think there are a lot of families that are really understandably having a bit more screen time than usual. That's not necessarily problematic in and of itself, but it's thinking about what children are watching. So broadly speaking, outside of current events, we know that TV shows that are kind of highly stimulating, so like really bright colors, really fast paced with kind of changing scenes kind of rapidly, can be highly stimulating to our children's brain. They really kind of activate that reward system of our brain, and what that means is then we can see that it's much harder for our children to transition away from the screen when they've been watching things like that, especially if it's a phone or an iPad and it's kind of in close proximity to their face. So just thinking carefully about what they're watching. So going for the low stimulation, kind of calm shows, ideally movies, even if they don't finish the movie or the film all in one go. We know that kind of films where there's a longer storyline that's going to take the duration of the whole film, that's generally kind of lower stimulation than some of the kind of shorter episodes. But for our older children, we really want to be thinking about kind of exposure to content related to current events, and really making sure that, as I was saying earlier, not only it's verified, reliable information, but that they're not spending hours just kind of scrolling and just being kind of overwhelmed and inundated with information about this. Because for all of us, there's an important balance to be had. We want to really try and draw on and highlight kind of their positives, their strengths, and how they, how they or how you as a family or a community, a school have managed difficult experiences in the past. And I guess the pandemic is a really beautiful example of this, because there are some similarities, right? There were times where we had to stay home. There was uncertainty, there was lots of fear, there was lots of confusion. So trying to pull out some of those strengths of what worked well for you as a family or as a community, as a school, when that happened last time. How do we highlight, how do we draw on those strengths and kind of build upon them? And for any of us, when we're going through kind of a distressing, difficult period of time, it can be really helpful to kind of draw on some grounding techniques. Grounding techniques are essentially kind of technique strategies, so things that we can do that are going to help us feel grounded. What we mean by that is to help us kind of really connect with the here and now and the present moment that we find ourselves in. To just give a few kind of examples of what grounding techniques might look like in children, it might be kind of like a really big, strong kind of cuddle with big squeezes, so some kind of like firm pressure to maybe to arms and legs. Our senses are a brilliant way to kind of ground ourselves. So we can use our senses as an anchor to the present moment. And there's a lovely kind of exercise called the 5 4 3 2 1. So we can do this ourselves, or we would get the children that we're caring for to look around, name 5 things they can see, 4 things they can feel or touch, 3 things they can hear, 2 things they can smell, and 1 thing they can taste. We can use our senses in another way as well. We don't always have to do the 5 4 3 2 1. We can pick out a particular kind of sense, and kind of utilize that sensory experience. So it might be thinking about, is there a kind of particular smell that our child really, really likes that we know will be quite calming and soothing to them? So can we go and get them to smell that? Is there a kind of strong taste that's going to be quite powerful and sort of help them to kind of regulate? Thinking about hearing, kind of, is there music that's going to kind of just shift and kind of lift their mood and help bring them back to the present? Another kind of really simple but effective one is kind of really firmly planting our feet into the ground. And sometimes it can be nice to kind of maybe take off our shoes, do this in a couple of different kind of flooring options, kind of feel the cold tiles, feel maybe the rug, go outside, feel the grass, feel the sand in the sand pit. And water play can be a really helpful tool for lots of children, and particularly where they're off school at the moment. Obviously, this is potentially more relevant for the younger children, but thinking about, if your child likes water, they enjoy playing, like, why not give them a daytime bath? This can be separate to their usual bath, isn't about washing, but it's just about a place for them to be, something that they can do, that's going to kind of they're going to enjoy and is going to help sort of regulate them. As I was saying at the beginning, sort of managing our own distress is essential. And we can only kind of really show up for our children, that we in the way that we want to, if we're able to manage our own distress and kind of regulate our own nervous system. So everything that I've just outlined in terms of how to support the children in our care absolutely applies to us as adults as well. So thinking about that kind of a little bit more, we want to be checking in with ourselves. We want to be thinking, how are we feeling? Kind of what's going on for us? And thinking about kind of who can we share this with? Who is there to kind of help hold my feelings right now? For many of us, especially those of us that are expats, we're going to have families back home that are going to be worried, going to be asking questions. I know many people right now are getting kind of messages saying, just come home. And obviously, it's not necessarily quite that simple right now. So often we're having to hold our own feelings, try to make sense of our own feelings when we probably have very little time and headspace, hold the feelings of the children in our care, kind of manage them. Then we're also having to kind of think about maybe family back home and holding their feelings, holding their worry, trying to reassure them. So it's really important to just sort of think about what's going on for you. How do you feel? What do you need? And who can show up for you right now? So I think a really good example of this is um, kind of social network. So, for example, as we know here in the UAE, everybody loves a WhatsApp group. I think WhatsApp groups are like Marmite at the moment. And sorry, that's a very kind of, I guess, British phrase. The food Marmite is something that in England we sort of say you either love or you hate. And even this morning, I've heard from kind of different people, sort of the WhatsApp groups are either really containing and they feel really helpful because there's all this information being shared and it helps me feel like I know what's happening and I know what to do. And I get that. I think that's a really valid, understandable position. And then somebody just half an hour after that said to me, I can't stand it. I can't be on the WhatsApp groups right now. It's just too much. I feel overwhelmed. I feel overloaded with information. I just feel like I'm absorbing everyone else's anxiety. So I think we need to think carefully about the people and the information we surround ourselves with, what feels helpful right now, what feels too much, and where do we get our information? Where do we get our support from? It's really important to be compassionate to ourselves and to have realistic expectations of ourselves. These are really abnormal circumstances. Of course, they're going to feel hard for us as well as the children that we care for. And we're absolutely not going to be showing up in the way that we maybe usually do or ideally would outside of these circumstances. And that is okay. That is normal and understandable. We are not robots, we're only human. So it's really important to be kind to yourselves and have realistic expectations of yourselves and sort of to really think about, okay, what is good enough right now? What can I manage in terms of how I show up for the children that I care for kind of right now? Maybe it's not what it usually looks like, but that's okay. What can be our new kind of normal and good enough right now? Linked with that, if you don't show up in the way that you'd like to, maybe you snap, maybe you don't respond in the way that you usually would. As I say, it's okay, it's normal and it's understandable. And there's something really, really powerful in kind of what we call rupture and repair. So ruptures, those moments that kind of don't go so well, where we don't respond as we'd like to, and it doesn't land well with our child, or the child that we're caring for. Um, that's okay. What we can do is there is always opportunity to repair. We can go back to them. We can acknowledge that that didn't feel great, that we didn't respond how we would like to. We can apologize. We can kind of we can make amends and do differently sort of moving forward. I also think that control is another big one that comes up. So I think often the things that we're struggling with kind of the most in situations like this is kind of uncertainty and control. And yes, the reality is that right now there is so much that is outside of our control. There's no denying that. So what often helps is focusing on what can we control? What is within our gift? What is within our control? And really trying to kind of come back to that, remind yourself of that, and just focus on what's within your control and what the next few steps are kind of that you need to do. Really thinking about kind of what are the priorities right now? Are there things that, yes, you'd hoped and planned to get done this week, but actually aren't essential and can be put on the back burner, can be addressed kind of at another time? Another thing that I haven't actually put on these slides, but I think is a really, really important point, is thinking about kind of religion and faith. And of course, that could be or will be a wide range of different religions. But I know for many people, they're finding real kind of comfort in their faith and in their religion, are kind of looking to their religion to provide comfort and to provide hope. So if that, of course, that's not relevant for all of us, but if that's relevant for you, then absolutely, I'd say kind of think about how you can feel as connected as feels helpful and possible for you, kind of to your faith, to your religion, and to your religious community right now. As I said at the very beginning, we're all going to be finding this difficult and we're all going to be experiencing a wide range of emotions. That's really normal and really understandable. For most of us, broadly speaking, we'll manage this time well. We'll draw on coping strategies we already have, or maybe new strategies that we learn in formats like this. And when things kind of die down, we'll go back to our baseline. We'll kind of go back to what's normal for us. However, if you're worried, if you feel like for yourself or for a child that you care for, their day-to-day functioning is significantly affected, they're really, really struggling to just get through the day right now. The emotions are really heightened and those kind of behavioral changes are really significant and they persist once things have stabilized. Or if you or they are just feeling completely overwhelmed and kind of really unsure of how to navigate this situation, how to kind of manage your own emotions, how to kind of manage and support the children in your care, then absolutely, we are here. We are open. We are operating kind of as usual. We're offering in person. We're offering online appointments. Please reach out to us if you or kind of someone you care for you think kind of could benefit from talking to us and having some additional input. I've just put some links. I didn't want to overwhelm you with too many things because I think we've all flooded with so much information right now. Um, but I just wanted to put a few links for kind of some specific sort of techniques or strategies that might help or I hope might help kind of right now for yourselves and for children. Okay. I just want to take a moment as well to acknowledge that this presentation and the content was sort of put together not exclusively by me and was hugely kind of informed by work of sort of current and previous colleagues. So particularly maybe Dr. Sophie Price, Professor David Forbes, who work with me now here at Maudsley Health, but also Dr. Shoshana Lyons from Beacon House back in England, where I used to work. Who just has an incredibly thoughtful, sensitive kind of approach to trauma and traumatic events, and has put together such a beautiful range of resources, which I put a link to in the last slide. In a moment, we'll move on to questions, and then I'll kind of come back. We'd like you to just, if you're able to, just fill out kind of a short feedback form to just kind of tell us sort of how you found today and anything else that you think would be helpful kind of right now. I'll leave it on there actually now whilst we do questions, because obviously some people might need to kind of pop out before we finish. Okay,
Okay,
so
Charlotte,
oh,
ready
thank
for
you.
some
Yeah,
questions?
yeah, please.
Right. Please, if you have questions, can you put them in the chat rather than raising your hand? So I have some questions that were asked before. I think you touched on COVID already and similarities. Someone asked about what if it was very difficult times and they're like flashbacks to COVID and any ways of dealing with that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, because I think we're really seeing that. I think almost every person that I've spoken to has sort of drawn some parallels and some similarities sort of between what's happening now and COVID. And as we were saying earlier, I think a lot of that is about uncertainty, kind of needing to stay indoors, moving to online learning, kind of fear, feeling a lack of control. There are, yeah, the list goes on, but obviously everybody's experience of COVID was individual, and likewise everybody's experience of what's happening right now is individual, because all of our histories and our current contexts are different. But thinking practically, if you're noticing what we might call sort of trauma symptoms or symptoms of PTSD around what's happening now, or what has happened in the past, COVID, or could be any other event actually, one of the best things that you can do is to name that, kind of acknowledge that, talk about that, but also grounding techniques, I think will be kind of really, really helpful. So we know when we're kind of experiencing a flashback, ultimately our brain is taking us back to that time in the past. We're not able to necessarily sort of regulate and identify that actually in the here and the now, we're safe. That's not happening to us now. That happened in the past. So grounding is a really, really powerful way of doing that. And I think then for the person experiencing the flashback, it's having another trusted person in their life to say phrases like I kind of just said to them, sort of like, that happened in the past. Yes, I know that was really, really difficult. It was really distressing, but it's in the past. You're here now. You can say the day, you can say the time, you can say the month and the year. I'm with you. We're in your bedroom. We're in the classroom. We're safe now. We're together. And kind of getting them to just do something nice and calming, like taking a few deep breaths.
Mhm. Lovely, thank you. We have now two questions that are more specific about kind of some tips how to manage. First
Yeah.
one is for a 9-year-old boy that is kind of aware that these are missiles interceptions and is asking questions such as what if the missiles hit us and things like that, and how do you have any tips as to how to manage this kind of questions?
Yeah, that's really hard. And yeah, you're absolutely not alone in this. Yeah, it sounds like, as you say, he's 9, so obviously he has some understanding of what's happening. He has some understanding of what a missile is, what a missile does. I would start with trying to explore his feelings. Maybe he shared them with you, or you could ask him about them, but just kind of naming them and validating them. So it might be kind of saying something like, sounds like you feel really scared. Sounds like you feel really worried about that happening. That's really understandable. That's a completely normal way to feel. So we want to start by sort of naming the emotion, validating the emotion, but then we want to kind of contain. So then I guess we want to say something like, the way that the UAE is managing this right now is it's intercepting the missiles to make sure that the missiles don't hit areas that have people in. So that is part of the army's plan, is that the missiles then are directed to areas where there aren't people. I'm not sure how much he's going to be aware of kind of the falling debris, and I guess then that's kind of a separate part if then he sort of brings that up. And I guess if he's aware of that, again, acknowledging that that is a reality. When the missiles are intercepted, yes, there is some debris, and the debris does kind of fall down onto the ground. And you can say something like, we know that they're trying to do that in places that means that the debris is not likely to fall into kind of public areas, areas where people are. And so the likelihood of that happening to us is very, very small. And just coming back to kind of validating how he's feeling, validating that they're normal feelings and concerns, but that right now he's safe and you're keeping him safe.
Okay. Thank you. The other example is about 6-year-old that does not know what's happening, thinks that this is related to a construction going on, being inside, and parents wanting to know what might be a good way to approach telling the truth before return to school,
Okay, okay.
and asking
So
if they should introduce fighting between countries.
yeah, it's a really, really difficult one. I think, as you say, at 6, it sounds like they will have kind of been able to understand what you're saying about it being construction noise. I suppose I'm wondering what you said to them about why school is closed. I know this is kind of webinar format, so you can't necessarily answer that. But I think you want to kind of run in part with the narrative that you've already given, but when he goes back to school, yeah, he might kind of hear things. So I think it's probably important to just give some kind of information. I think it's okay to say something like, yeah, right now some countries are fighting, some countries are arguing. They're not agreeing on things, and that has meant that it's been safer for us to stay inside. That's why we've been inside, and that's why you haven't been at school. And then I guess when schools reopen, you can kind of then link it with saying kind of it's safe for us to be outside now, and that is why we're going back to school. So you might choose to say kind of the fighting has stopped, which I know might not be completely accurate, but I guess thinking about different forms of fighting. So kind of saying that the fighting has stopped, and so it's safe for us to be outside and to go back to school now. I hope that
Okay.
helps. I know it's really difficult in these situations because obviously I don't know the full context of your
Mhm.
family, of your child. So some of what I kind of say might not fit completely and might not feel completely relevant, but I hope that kind of most of what I'm saying does and does land.
Okay, we have one more, I think, unless
Okay.
people have more questions that they want to add. And there's someone saying, since that I'm strong and resistant to the current uncertain times, but I feel fully exhausted, I'm in the body, like I did a heavy workout. Please, perhaps it's due to poor sleep. So are there any options to solve it except for medical treatment, such as pills?
Okay. Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think is so relevant for so many of us, right? Especially when we're hearing the sounds at night or we're getting the really loud alerts sort of in the middle of the night or the early hours of the morning. I don't think anyone is sleeping as they usually would right now. So I think maybe it's thinking about whatever opportunities you have throughout the day or earlier in the evening to get as much rest or as much sleep kind of as possible. It's thinking about making adjustments to your sleeping environment to make them feel as calming, as soothing, as conducive to sleep as possible, such as keeping it really dark, a nice cool temperature, maybe some kind of calming smells, avoiding caffeine for kind of at least sort of 3 hours, if not more, sort of before you go to sleep. Maybe thinking about having something like a warm shower or bath kind of before you go to bed. Hopefully this will improve naturally as things kind of stabilize. But if you're really struggling, if you're really not getting sleep, even when maybe your kids are sleeping, or we stop hearing noises, we stop getting alerts at night, and you've tried kind of everything to make your sleep kind of routine as conducive to sleep as possible, then absolutely you can get in touch with us. There are options kind of in terms of medication around sleep. It's never our first line treatment. It's never kind of what we start with, but of course there are people that really do need that and need help with that. Um, I didn't actually put any links to it, but if you Google sleep hygiene, and if you Google sleep hygiene, maybe get self-help, then you'll be able to find some really helpful resources around sort of our sleep routine, our sleep environment, and just how to try and increase the likelihood of us having a good night's sleep.
Okay, we got 3 new questions now.
Okay, I think we're doing all right
Charlotte.
for time.
Yes. So first one, there's two related to sort of to sleep. So one is help those who have nightmares. The other one is with how to manage if there's emergency alerts at night and noises that wake up children and they're scared, but also you're afraid yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so first part is nightmares, and then second part is I might
Yeah,
just
so
come,
two
I'll
two
start
different
with
questions. Yeah.
nightmares, and then if I
Mhm.
need you to remind me of the second part, I might come
Okay,
back to
sure.
you. So I suppose it depends what the content of the nightmares are. So for lots of children, they might have night terrors, they might have nightmares on a range of topics. Um, if you feel as though they're having nightmares about what's happening now, or maybe a traumatic experience that they've had in the past, again, grounding can be a really, really helpful way of managing kind of when they wake up from a nightmare. Um, and I think again, it's thinking about kind of their sleep environment and just trying to increase a sense of emotional and physical safety in the lead up to bed and during bed as much as possible. Um, a lot of us have worked really hard to put certain kind of routines in place for our children and for their sleep, and we can be kind of a bit reluctant to change those up and do things differently for fear that it will undo all of the hard work that we've done. But sometimes in, completely abnormal circumstances like this, and if our child is experiencing nightmares, we might want to think about how we best support them at night. Obviously it depends upon their age, but do they need to come and sleep in our room for a little bit? Do they need one of us to sleep in their room for a little bit? Just to be kind of that safe space to physically help kind of ground them and support them sort of during the night. Um, yeah, so I hope that helps. So the second part about the alerts, I think I noticed yesterday that thankfully the sound I think has toned down a little bit. So let's hope that continues. But even so, at night, of course, it's really alarming. It wakes us up, it wakes our children up, and it's really disconcerting. And it does, yeah, really evoke a kind of panic response. So I think it's about just giving a short kind of containing response to our children. So it might be something like, gosh, that noise was really loud, wasn't it? That really kind of startled me or made me feel scared. That's the UAE government, and as part of them kind of keeping us safe, they're giving us information about what's happening and what we need to do. So right now we're going to stay together in the bedroom, or we can stay at home as we are, and we're safe right here, right now. And then just kind of thinking about maybe doing a calming activity, to just sort of help kind of calm and regulate everyone before kind of trying to go back to sleep. Um,
Okay.
but yes, it's hard.
I think that there's more. Okay, we have two more. Let's see if we have time. There's one more about someone question about them having four kids, between 6 and 13, and only one being anxious, and then sort of the 13-year-old enjoying having extra time on devices, the younger ones enjoying time at home, and then kind of like managing those different feelings, and not all the kids being anxious, but some.
Yeah, yeah, this is such a good point, and actually reminds me something that I didn't say in the webinar earlier on, that actually whilst we're all in many ways in the same situation, we're all responding to it differently. So I'm sure you'll kind of be seeing in your friendship group or in your communities, there are some people that are almost living life completely as normal, apart from school, and others that haven't left the house since Saturday. There is no right or wrong. There's a whole spectrum of responses kind of in between that, and each individual, each family is kind of making a call in terms of what feels safe, what feels right for themselves right now. And what this person has described, I think, really mirrors our experience of the pandemic. So there were lots of children that found lockdown, found online learning really hard, and then there were others that thrived. They loved it. They loved being at home. They loved having more time with their parents, not having to go out and about and manage challenging aspects of the environment. So we're absolutely going to be seeing the same here. And of course, especially maybe for your younger ones, like a 6-year-old that doesn't have a full, if any, understanding of what's going on right now, like, yeah, they're probably loving it. More time to play, more time at home, more time on screens. I think it's just acknowledging, kind of, especially with your child that is anxious, that it's okay that they feel this way. Just because others aren't feeling this way, it doesn't mean that it's wrong or there's a problem to feel the way that they're feeling. And to maybe try and kind of unpick with them what it is in particular that's making them feel anxious. Is there something specific that they're feeling really anxious or feeling really worried about? I guess I'm also wondering whether anxiety was already present for this child or whether this is a completely sort of new thing. If it was already present, then I think it's going back to anything that you found has helped anxiety in the past. If it's completely new, then yeah, keep an eye on it. And if you feel as though it's kind of worsening and it feels unmanageable, then absolutely please get in touch and we'd be more than happy to support you as a family to think about how to navigate the anxiety at the moment.
Okay, maybe let's make it a last one, and I don't think there's any more. So there's the last one is a bit different because it's about someone whose mother is visiting, who's 71 years old and with high
Yeah.
blood pressure, and feeling very scared and sort of wondering how to support. So it's different generation compared to other questions.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the thing, right? I'm sure for most people that are on this webinar, we're residents here. So maybe there are people that kind of are locals, were born here, or there'll be lots of expats as well. And we, many people actually have visitors right now, and it's a really challenging time, of course, to kind of be a visitor. So I think a lot of what we've discussed applies. It's about kind of thinking about the information that's shared, what's helpful information to share, what's accurate, reassuring of safety. If there are medical concerns, then it's thinking about kind of making sure that you have access to medical support, whether that's medication, whether that's a checkup, whether that's a review, um, just following kind of the official guidance. If you're not local, if you're an expat, kind of following embassy guidance as well, and just trying to kind of ride it out as best as you can, and trying to limit the amount of time that you're all talking about and kind of focusing on this and trying to just think about, okay, given the context, how can we make the best out of this situation? How can we still enjoy time together? How can we still enjoy the visit? Yeah, but yeah, that's really tough.
Mhm. I think we had just one more person asking about if kids are scared, so not eating. I don't know if you can just maybe at least comment on it because that hasn't come up much.
Yeah, yeah, but I think this is really normal. And I think this is maybe one of the areas where we want to be a little bit more lenient than usual. So again, obviously, I don't know the full context, but that's really normal, right? I was talking to one of my friends kind of the other day, and she was saying that she just doesn't feel hungry. So, all of us are having individual reactions in our bodies, and maybe they're feeling scared, maybe they're feeling sick, so they just don't want to eat in the same way. I would try not to panic. I try not to worry unless there's some sort of, medical condition that means that they need to eat certain foods or at certain times, etc. But generally speaking, try not to focus on each meal or even each day and worrying, are they getting enough? And kind of trying to take a broader picture of a few days or a week and thinking about, are they getting enough during that time span? Maybe meals need to look a little bit different. Maybe it's smaller amounts. Maybe it's little and often. Maybe it's kind of, yeah, moving to snacks. And this is the same as sleep, right? Often we can feel really worried about this because we think, oh no, but I've put so much effort into their eating routine. I don't want to kind of change things. But actually, our children are often more resilient than we give them credit for, and they're able to manage these adaptations when they know that the circumstances are abnormal and unique. This isn't like, oh, we're just trying a new approach. So I think name it with them, acknowledge it with them, and kind of try and problem solve together. Sort of suggest a few things like, okay, should we try particular foods? Shall we try having less food kind of more often? Yeah, I hope that helps.
Right. We've done with all the questions that were in the comments.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We really, really hope that you found it helpful. As I say, if you could take a moment to fill out the feedback, we'd be really grateful because it will really help us think about other topics that you would like us to cover. That's absolutely what we need. What we want to do right now is think about, what the community needs and how we can best support you. So any feedback is gratefully received. As I said, that you'll be able to access the recording at the end. These are really, really difficult times. It's normal and understandable to be struggling with them. Take care of yourselves and each other. And yeah, we're wishing you all the very best from all of us here at Maudsley Health. Okay, bye everyone.